Hey there, thanks for coming. Could Deku ever turn evil? After taking a closer look at the main protagonist of My Hero Academia, I'm gonna be honest and tell you right now, I think so. Call me crazy, but I found that Deku actually shares quite a number of traits with real-life villains. And if you watch this video all the way to the end, I suspect you'll agree with me too. Here's what you need to know. The future #1 hero, Deku, comes from humble beginnings. Growing up, the boy had but one goal in life: to become an unshakable force for good and fight evil on the front lines, just like his idol. I mean, in a world full of superheroes where being gifted was the norm, it wasn't at all an unreasonable dream. Hero names in My Hero Academia play a big part in foreshadowing a character's personality. All Might is the omnipotent being, the Almighty. Endeavor is the hero of hard work and struggle. And Deku is... well, the name Deku is one of those words that has two meanings in Japanese. The first meaning, useless, a tribute to the fact that he belonged to the small minority of unlucky people who were born without powers. And the second meaning, something along the lines of, you can do it, depicting his never give up attitude, even in the gravest of circumstances. Which is exactly what earns him the attention of the omnipotent All Might, who imbues him with the most powerful quirk of all time. The dual meanings seem to tell the complete story of Deku, encapsulating his transformation from zero to hero, but there's also a third meaning of the word, one that the show hasn't revealed. Deku, in Japanese, also means puppet. Now, was this an oversight by the author? I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. A puppet is an object often associated with manipulation. When you play with a puppet, you pull its strings to control its actions, and I think that's perfect foreshadowing for what's to come with Deku. Deku starts off as a fanatical child, desperate to be a hero. In the absence of a father figure, he looked towards mainstream media to fill this void. There, Deku found and adopted a role model, the strongest hero of all time, the ultimate man, and therefore the ultimate father, All Might. And through his journey from childhood to adolescence, he gradually learns what it means to be a hero, all by just watching his idol on TV. But as we all know, there's problems with the mainstream media. They tend to only show certain faces of certain people, certain narratives of certain events, and you rarely get to see the whole story from just that one source. So when Deku starts to embody the heroistic ideals of the idols he looked up to, he's not getting the full picture. What he's getting is a caricature of what it means to be a hero. Always be good, only have good intentions, save the day at any cost. And so when he finally does get a quirk, the one thing he'd been so hungry for his entire life, he finally gets to play hero. And we, the audience, can see it as clear as day. He gets portrayed in the anime as a selfless goody two-shoes who puts everyone else before himself. He constantly risks his life and future as a hero in an attempt to save the day. He's doing the exact same thing a TV hero would do in his position. Deku isn't acting like a hero. He's acting like what he thinks a hero is. And that's really boring. Deku's the most boring protagonist of My Hero Academia. Compare him to the hot-headed but ingeniously strategic Bakugo or the physically and emotionally scarred Todoroki. Deku's as plain as a slice of stale bread next to the two. And he's supposed to be the main character? And I think that's because what we see of Deku now isn't the real him. I think he's just playing a character, a 15-year-old kid trying to act out his shallow understanding of the hero archetype sold to him by mainstream media. And that's the first step in his eventual downfall. The second reason I think Deku could turn evil is because he doesn't seem to have a dark side. As we mentioned earlier, both the other protagonists, Todoroki and Bakugo, have very clear dark sides. Bakugo struggles with aggression and Todoroki struggles with abuse, while Deku has no visible edge to him. Now, as a psych grad, one thing I've learned is that everyone has some darkness within them, and if you can't see it, chances are they're repressing it. And in my experience, the most dangerous people of all are the ones who repress their dark sides the most. Just look at the church, for example. Some of the most depraved, disgusting stuff is done by the supposed holiest of people. I believe Deku has a dark side, but he's repressing it with all his strength, because he feels it's what he owes to All Might, the mentor who gifted him the opportunity to live out his dream as a hero. It also relates to his beliefs of what a hero should be, right? Because Deku gets his ideals from TV, and because TV heroes never seem to have a dark side, Deku has been led to believe that in order to become a good hero, he can't have a dark side either. Which is yet another reason we, the audience, see him as a shiny paragon of pure goodness. But good and evil are just two sides of the same coin. It only matters who's telling the story. The war in Ukraine is a good example of this. To most Americans, the Russians are the bad guys. But to most Russians, the Americans are the bad guys. Now, I don't really care about all this political stuff. I don't follow any of it. But the message here is clear, and it's one we should really keep in mind. Always ask questions. Don't blindly believe in the ideals peddled to you by other people. Otherwise, you could end up like Deku, a child completely bought into the media-controlled vision of what a hero should be. Just imagine if Deku had been brought up watching villains instead of heroes on TV. Who would his idols be? What would his morals be? They wouldn't be the same, I'll tell you that much. Okay, where were we? Right. Deku's motivation in life is to become the perfect hero, but he's blind to the blatant flaws in the hero ideology, and that's the third reason, I think, for his descent into villainy. Here's some of the flaws I'm talking about. Hero culture makes people weak and dependent. All the civilians in My Hero Academia rely on heroes to save them from the bad guys, even if they themselves have quirks. In fact, if I remember correctly, you even need a license to use yours in self-defense. This teaches the civilians a really horrible lesson, that they're all powerless in the face of evil, and that they can't ever save themselves, and they should always just wait for the proper licensed heroes to show up every time. Here's another flaw of hero culture. People with strong quirks get to rise to the top, while others with weak quirks are left in the dust. At first glance, you might think, yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? And it does. Until you realize that valuing individuals based solely on their genetic makeups is the same ideology a certain angry Austrian man had back in the 40s. Last one. Hero culture promotes virtue signaling. A lot of the heroes aren't heroes because they believe in doing good or saving people. They're doing it for fame or for money. Fake heroes, the kind that Stain, the hero killer, hates, are using heroism as a means to wealth and fame. By pretending to be the virtuous good guy, they gain easy entry into the hearts of the people by appealing to their sense of morality. And the more virtuous you seem, the greater the reward. Because Deku has so blindly bought into the hero ideology, it would make sense to assume that he's also unconsciously bought into its flaws too. Because to be able to separate yourself from the flaws of a system, you need to first see them, and I don't think Deku does. Now, you might be thinking, nah, come on, no way I'd be such a sucker to be brainwashed like that. It's just anime. But you'd be wrong. Let me tell you a story, and it's a true one. Couple years ago, I met a really nice girl. She was pretty, she was smart, like really smart. She went to the UK equivalent of Stanford for uni, but she was also a Christian fundamentalist. And I'm not talking about a go to church every other Sunday kind of Christian. This girl told me that the earth was created 5,000 years ago. She thought evolution was one big scam, and she believed that anyone who didn't accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior was destined to spend an eternity being grilled like a human kebab, even babies. So after a couple of dates, we decided that maybe we weren't right for each other and parted ways. A few months ago, I found out that some pretty bad stuff happened to her as a consequence of her blind beliefs. I won't say what, but the result was that she had to leave the country because of it. So when I tell you about Deku and his devotion to the Church of Heroes, I'm telling you from my own real-life experience that it's possible to become so invested in an ideology that you can't see its flaws. Stain, the hero killer, was the one person in the entire series that exposed the shortcomings in the hero propaganda. And we, the audience, could relate, which is why the character got so immensely popular. Stain isn't a hero, nor is he a straight-up villain like the rest of the cast. He lives in a grey area, somewhere in the space between. He does kill people, yes, but not because he's evil or because he enjoys violence and chaos. He's just a man on a morally questionable mission to rid the world of false heroes. And I think all of us could see that. Which brings me to my next point. Deku sees in black and white, and not because he's colorblind. Let me ask you a question. After hearing about Stain, would you consider him 100% a villain, on the same level as Shigaraki or All for One? Probably not, right? And that's because you understand nuance. On a level, you know that there's no such thing as pure good and pure evil, and that most people are a mixture of the two. Life isn't just black and white, it's mostly grey. But that's exactly the kind of distinction Deku doesn't make, that he can't make. And I believe that's the fourth step in his descent into eventually becoming a villain. Deku sees Stain as just another villain, with no sense of nuance. To Deku, you're either a hero or a villain. For the most part, he treats heroes as people, but villains as obstacles he needs to overcome in order to climb the ladder. He almost dehumanizes them, and it's only when he meets this goofball that he starts to somewhat understand that villains are people too. Deku's limited worldview makes him even more susceptible to manipulation at the hands of a skilled puppeteer. He's like a guided missile. All the person pulling his strings has to do is to label his enemy a villain, and Deku, like a hired gun, will take care of the rest, with no questions asked, all while still believing himself to be the world's #1 hero. The fifth and final reason I think Deku is heading for evil, the final nail in the coffin, is his lack of emotional control. Deku's known for his reckless behavior, a trait that almost sent his hero career to an early grave multiple times, something that his teachers and mentors have constantly warned him about in the past. Emotional control is something a young man should take very seriously, because if you let your emotions dictate your actions, then you're gonna be a loose cannon, firing in all directions without any focus. But I think what Deku's doing goes a little deeper than that. We talked just now about how Deku represses his dark side in order to be the shining exemplar of a perfectly good hero. But we didn't really talk about the consequences of that, so here's that now. The more you repress your impulses, whatever they may be, the stronger those impulses become. And the stronger the impulses become, the more likely that they'll eventually break loose and take control of you. That's what famed Swiss psychologist Carl Jung would call shadow possession. To help you understand this, I want you to think back to a time where you did something bad and that you thought you could never do. Maybe a time where you burst out in anger at a loved one. Maybe when you said something hurtful to someone undeserving. Or maybe when you thought something so horrible that you never let it escape the confines of your skull. When you regained your senses, did you immediately regret your actions? Did you think to yourself, oh God, who was I back there? The me I know would have never said those things. Well, that's a prime example of shadow possession, and that's exactly what's happening to Deku when he does the reckless things that puts his life and the lives of the people he's supposedly protecting in jeopardy. Because Deku repressed his dark side so much in order to become what he believed a hero should be, his shadow grew stronger and stronger over time the more he pushed. So in times of great stress, he isn't able to hold it in any longer, and his shadow comes out and takes control of him. That's why, I think at least, he's reckless. And if he continues down this path, his shadow possession will make him do more and more reckless and possibly even evil things. Alright, we've been through a lot. Let's recap. All the stuff we talked about above basically boils down to two things. I think Deku is a prime target for villain conversion because 1. He has a blind belief in the ideals of heroism. Everything he knows about being a hero, he learned growing up watching caricatures of heroes on TV. And what gets shown on TV can be easily manipulated depending on who's in control. And 2. He has repressed his dark side beyond imagination, and it occasionally pops up to take control of him, causing him to act recklessly and dangerously when it does. So if you notice that you yourself have fallen victim to one or both of these things, then you might want to watch out, because you too could be heading down a path you didn't know existed. If you're still here, then you probably already realized that this isn't your typical anime analysis. I'm Sorex. I started this channel with the goal of inspiring young men to improve themselves through the power of story. I hope the stuff we talked about in this video helped you at least understand a little bit more about yourself, and that you'll find it useful in your own journey through life. So if you found any value in this video at all, please subscribe and join the gang. And if you're interested in learning more about your own dark side, then watch this video next, where I talk all about it.